Hi there, this is Nick Tate. I'm super excited to be part of the new documentary, The Eagle Has Landed. An exclusive look starts now.
50 years ago, an icon was born. The Eagle transporter is one of the greatest sci-fi spacecraft ever conceived. To this day, the design provokes an intense devotion among countless fans around the world. The question is, why? I'm writer-director Jeffrey Morris. I've been enamored with the Eagle since I first saw it in the TV series Space 1999 back in 1975. As a child who followed the Apollo program, the Eagle felt like a direct descendant of NASA's lunar module. Those transformative moon missions left an indelible impact on a generation, as did the Eagle in Space 1999. Over the years, I've discovered that I'm just one of millions of fans who has an affection for the Eagle and a nostalgia for a future we never achieved. So I'm shooting a feature documentary about the origins of this beloved ship, while also exploring its ongoing cultural impact. And I'm inviting you to join me. I'll be speaking with the Eagle's designer, visual effects wizard Brian Johnson. I'll also chat with Nick Tate, the actor who played legendary pilot Captain Alan Carter. It's going to be an epic journey as I travel around the globe to speak with Eagle aficionados and luminaries from the worlds of science and science fiction. As for myself, the visionary world building in Space 1999 blew my mind. It ultimately inspired me to become a filmmaker and production designer. I'm the creator of hard sci-fi projects such as the forthcoming deep space adventure Persephone, the apocalyptic underwater thriller Oceanus, and the universe-hopping techno-fantasy Parallel Man. Now I'm bringing all of my experience and passion to the creation of this documentary. The good news is we've already begun production. We self-financed a shoot in Louisville, Kentucky at Wonderfest, where I spoke with lifelong Eagle fans from around the country. They shared passionate stories about the iconic vessel and the aspects that make it so memorable. Then I traveled to Colorado, where I interviewed Kevin J. Anderson, the best-selling author of books set in the Dune, Star Wars, and X-Files universes. He also happens to be a huge fan of Space 1999. Recently, Kevin and I co-authored the novelization of my film Persephone. We had a blast discussing our mutual love of the Eagle and what it represents. Yet, there's still plenty left to do. I have to hire production crews at locations around the world. I also need to create visual effects and music. And of course, it all has to be edited together at a level that will rival any award-winning documentary. Now I'm asking for your assistance in completing the voyage. Check out our Kickstarter. There are tons of great rewards and even a couple of awesome stretch goals. A future began 50 years ago, and its time is now. Become a supporter of The Eagle Has Landed.
Robservations with Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and the, perhaps never to be defined, existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm Rob casting at you from the Robservatory, wearing the same t-shirt I was wearing last night. It's a long story. We had more puppies born. It was a long day. Anyway, this is Robservations, episode number 888. You know, I think like lots of us who watch this show, there are lines from movies that echo in your mind. You know, just take your pick. Right now, I know that all of you watching me have movie lines right in your head. Like, think of whenever you guys, whenever you leave someplace. One my friends and I used a lot for 30 years was, Marines, we are leaving. Whenever we leave someplace, you know, from Aliens. And just take your pick. There's a million different movie lines that movie fans, pop culture fans use for various situations that they repeat. If they don't say them aloud, they're going through your head. That's what I guess people do. And one of the ones I've always loved, one of my favorites, is from Die Hard, when Hans Gruber is talking about the breadth of the reach of the Nakatomi Corporation, and he's in the room looking at all of the different models of the different bridges, oil derricks, buildings. Oh, that's beautiful. I used to love to make models when I was a boy. And what he says, he makes a crack about Alexander. Alexander wept when he saw that there were no more worlds to conquer, which isn't apparently not an actual quote from anything, but it's a paraphrase. And he's talking about Alexander the Great. And at that moment, he's invoking a historical figure. And if you know who Alexander the Great was, and maybe people didn't because Oliver Stone's 3 versions of that movie hadn't come out yet. But if you knew who Alexander the Great was, that comment that he made had a lot more resonance. It said something about his character, that maybe he identified with Alexander the Great, which is interesting that someone like Hans Gruber would. Make sense. I'm an exceptional thief, and I've often thought that this is just general knowledge that's floating around. It's like when Tom Noonan in Heat is talking about, it's just floating around out there. You just have to grab it, with the information when he's trying to plan the heist. And I've always kind of felt that way about learning, about knowledge. And it's funny because I just realized that for this stream, I actually pulled a quote that I love, and I don't remember if I actually kept it. You know what? I probably didn't, or maybe I did. Let me see if I can find it, because it's a diatribe from Repo Man. And I don't know if you all know Repo Man, but it's let's see, I guess I don't have it. But it's a really great video of Emilio Estevez talking to Lori Walter about stuff. Like when you learn something, you've never thought about something in your life. And then when you learn about it, or when you think about it, or maybe you did know about it, but you hadn't thought about it in a long time, once it's in your mind, suddenly you see it everywhere. It's the plate of shrimp quote. But I've always thought that was sort of a very interesting phenomenon that sort of happens. When you learn about things, suddenly they're just out there. Like you were never aware of something before. And then once you've learned about it, then you see it in all these places, and you realize, my God, I was surrounded by this thing that is all around me, and I didn't know what it was. And it's always amazed me. And when I was a kid, and I'm sure obviously here's how I'm going to tell you. We've been talking about this a lot. This has been coming up a lot lately. But when I was a kid, there were still door-to-door salesmen who, like, we lived in a pretty upper middle class area that is now so wealthy I could never afford to even live in the house that I grew up in on Mercer Island, Washington. Could never live there. I'd need a lot more money. I'd have to make a lot more hit movies to even live in my house that I grew up in. But they sold encyclopedias. There were literally door-to-door salesmen that sold encyclopedias. And I loved encyclopedias, but the only place you could ever see them was like in my elementary school library, Island Park Elementary School. And I used to love encyclopedias because you would open them up and it was just page after page of random shit that you didn't know. And when the door-to-door salesman came to our house, and this was expensive, like to buy, now we didn't get Encyclopedia Britannica. We got like the World Book Encyclopedia. And in my mind, the World Book was always the Pepsi to Encyclopedia Britannica's Coke. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it did to me. And I knew that like the Encyclopedia Britannica would cost more money, because whenever you saw an encyclopedia mentioned in pop culture, no one ever said the World Book Encyclopedia. was always the Encyclopedia Britannica. So even though, but the idea of having an encyclopedia in our house was like the coolest thing ever. Now, this is the 70s. Like, there's no internet. There's no Wikipedia. There's nothing. You had the newspaper. You'd have to go through a microfiche or something at the library. The Dewey Decimal System was your friend. And so I wanted it. And my parents, because sometimes they would indulge me, they got the World Book Encyclopedia. And I remember, like, I had a microscope, a working microscope. Like, I'd got a microscope, and I would make, you go out in the backyard and pull wings off bugs and make slides. And I had a little in our downstairs living room that later became my movie room. It wasn't the living room, it was the family room with a washer and dryer where it was connected to the garage. But it was it's the TV room. It was basically my room. Other than my bedroom, it was my room. And I set up like a laboratory. I had a little table, and I made a little sign that says Bobby's Lab. I had my microscope there, but my prized possession was like the World Book Encyclopedia. My dad got me shelves, and I had the table and the shelves on them, and I had the whole alphabet. Some letters like S and T might have had 2 volumes or something. And when I wanted to know something, I'd sit at my laboratory desk and I'd read the encyclopedias. And I don't know if that made me a weird kid or not. But the funny thing was about those encyclopedias is that you just learn random shit. Like, I would literally read the encyclopedia like it was a novel. There's no narrative, obviously, but you never knew what was going to be on the next page. I mean, it was alphabetical, so you'd go from like neurology, be reading about the brain or something, and to whatever came after neurology. I don't know. I don't have the World Book. I haven't seen a World Book Encyclopedia in 30 years, probably. As a matter of fact, I can't tell you what happened to my World Book Encyclopedia. I don't know where it went. I mean, I was rushed out of my parents. I was in my junior year of college. We're selling the house. And I'm like, Mom, I'm finishing up my junior year in college. I've got a couple months to go. You have to come home and help us move. And I'm like, what? And she was selling my bedroom furniture that I had my whole life. I'm like, well, what am I going to take with me to California? You buy something new. This is old furniture, but it was great. I'm like, but I had all my Star Trek books in there. I knew where they all went. No one would know if I went. Anyway, that's a long story. But what happened to that World Book? Don't know. The point is that I was one of those. I just love learning about shit. And what fascinated me was when I would learn something, the connections that you suddenly that were there all the time, you just didn't see them. And one of the things, I think the reason that I've always said that I believe in there is a certain objectivity to art. People's opinions about art are subjective, but people's opinions about art are only as good as the information that they have coming into them, and that they already have to process that. And I don't trust anybody the subjectivity of art is a very individual thing, but I don't trust it because a lot of people don't have a lot of information that would allow them to delineate between something that's good and something that's bad. And that's fine, because that's their life. And I'm not going to complain that somebody hasn't read some book or listened to some record or seen some movie or been somewhere. Like, I've never been to Florence. I've wanted to go to Florence, Italy my entire life. My mom told me she was there a number of times when she was younger. She was an art history major. She went to Berkeley, and she told me how beautiful Florence was. And I always wanted to go to Florence. I've never been to Tuscany. I've never been to that part of Italy. And so when I watch a movie like Ridley Scott's, Hannibal, and a lot of that movie takes place in Florence. So I'm watching where they're going and where they're shooting. You see that famous bridge, and if you read the Da Vinci Code, I didn't know that bridge had more stuff that you could. Anyway, there's a scene in the Da Vinci Code that's on that bridge, and yes, I read the Da Vinci Code. When it came out, Dan Brown, I didn't know about Angels and Demons. I know they came out first, but when the Da Vinci Code was, a big bestseller, you got to read that shit, right? I would read any big bestseller that has any kind of a genre bent that's not like The Notebook or Bridges Over Madison County. Although I did see the movie, You know, I'm not going to read Bridges Over Madison County. It's not my thing. I mean, it could be my thing. It's a good story. It's just like I'm not inclined for that genre in terms of reading. I'd much rather read something kick-ass like Jonathan Mayberry's new Joe Ledger novel, Cave 13, which, if you guys like that kind of thing, you should read it because the Joe Ledger series is great, and Cave 13 was a banger, and it was a cliffhanger, too. So anyway, so where was I? Oh, so I'm watching Hannibal. I knew it took place in Florence, and I'm looking at all these amazing places, and I'm like, I can't tell you if these are real places, if these are, and it bothered me. Because, you know, here, this beautiful depiction of Florence and everything in it, I wanted to see it. You know, I wanted to go there. I wanted and when I'm watching the movie, because I've never been to Florence, I don't know if what I'm seeing is actually really in Florence, if it was just a set they built, and that bothers me. You know, because I don't know, and I don't know because I haven't been to Florence, and I might never go. I might never go to Florence in my life. So when I'm watching movies, there are many times when I will watch a film, like another example, speaking of Italy, The Talented Mr. Ripley. You know, the first hour of that movie when they're in like Mangi, which is like some fictitious town. But I didn't know it was a fictitious town. It looks great. And hanging out, you know, seeing Tuvo Americano, come on, in jazz bars. I want to know how to play sax, which I don't know how to play. And I want to hang out with Jude Law in jazz bars and Tom Ripley before he becomes a murderer. So, you know, when you watch those things, I really wish that I had firsthand knowledge of a lot of the stuff that's in movies that I watch. And when I'm truly interested when it's over, because we live in the modern age, you can go Google it, you know, and you can find out whatever you want. A lot of cities in the world, they have cameras that are just placed. You can log in and look at street corners at certain cities, and then you can like figure out where you are in that city, and you can look, oh yeah, look at this place, or oh yeah, look at that place. And I'm going to admit to you guys, I do a lot of that because, you know, sitting here waiting for something or before, if you have 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, I'm going to go look at this place or what's going on over here. We have all this information at our fingertips. But it never ceases to amaze me how important a broad base of general knowledge is to everyday life. You never know. You don't know whether you're in a meeting and you can draw on something. You don't know if you're on a phone call with somebody. You don't know if you meet a stranger in line for a film, or you're at the grocery store and you can recognize somebody might have a lapel pin or something and be like, oh, you can strike up a conversation with a perfect stranger and find out more about that lapel pin or something. It has been my experience in life that the broader that your knowledge is, and I'm not saying, and here's the thing, I'm not saying that you have to know everything about everything, but a general broad base of knowledge about a lot of things will make you enjoy your life much more. I mean, it just makes that much, it makes every single day more interesting. You know, people are always asking me about that. Like, Rob, why are you so interested in, like, you're always bouncing off the walls and having a good time? And I'm like, well, because there's nothing in any direction that I look, especially in here, that there's something I'm not interested in or want to know more about. Like, there's a picture on my Instagram feed because I kept drawing or driving by on the way to the John Campea studios. There was a section on the freeway that looked surprisingly desolate. And I'm like, why is there nothing there? What is there? And why is it there? So I'll get off the freeway. And I actually took a really cool picture. It was kind of this industrial area where there was like big empty, like you could store oil there, chemicals or something. But I'm like, why here? And why not somewhere else? And who runs this place? And why is there nobody here? You know, and I remember when I first went to John's studio, we were in Corona. And, you know, I said to him where he lives and where the studio was, I go, have you ever gone to that side of the freeway where there's this gigantic, there's all these houses? I mean, it's a huge, it's miles long, and you can see it. It's up on the hills. And I'm like, what's up at the top of this main road? Like, you could go one way and go to the studio, or you go the other way, go under the freeway and just follow the road up and go see what's up to the top of the hill. Like, what's up there? What if you found like some handmade ice cream parlor or something? What if there's a great restaurant, some crazy Italian restaurant? And John's like, why would, who cares? And I'm like, that was a valid question. That was a valid question. So it got me thinking, because I don't feel that a general broad base of knowledge is, and this is not a put down, but I feel like when I'm watching things and reading things, it used to be like when you'd read film criticism, you'd read Roger Ebert's work, or you read some of the great Pauline Kael, and of course all the great French critics that wrote for Cahiers du Cinéma, Bazin, and Truffaut and Godard before they were filmmakers. And these guys were talking about art history and art color theory, and they knew the whole history of cinema, and it's daunting. But when you would read their criticism, it was like, oh, these guys are drawing. You were learning as much about the thing being reviewed. You were learning as much about the world around you as you were learning about the thing being reviewed. And I feel that fandom, science fiction, fantasy, horror, genre fandom, is strangely, I feel it's drifting into, and maybe this is just a function of me getting older, but the underpinnings of understanding a genre, the classics, there's a reason now I feel that more people are like, ugh, you don't have to read that stuff. That doesn't have any bearing on you. We've progressed so far now. And I'm like, but have we? Like foundational, like I've told people on this show before, like I don't think you can be a great storyteller without reading the Bible in the West. I'm Jewish. The sequel, the Bible Part 2, the New Testament, I'm not even supposed to believe in that. But I think that to understand the canon of Western literature, going all the way back thousands of years, and to understand the United States, to understand all the West, you need to have read the Bible. And I don't mean Bible verses. I don't mean when you go to a football game to know what John 3:16 means. I mean to have read the Bible. And you don't have to have a working knowledge of the Bible. But so many of the stories and characters that are in the Bible have influenced so much of our literature. So to not have read the Bible is to do yourself a disservice, because so many stories that we all know and love have religious allusions in them. And they refer back. And if you don't know that, they still work. But if you do know that, your experience is so much the richer. I remember, obviously, I like Star Trek. And when Nicholas Meyer took over Star Trek, suddenly he was throwing out, best of times, worst of times, Message Spock, Tale of Two Cities. Well, they don't come out and you see that it's the Tale of Two Cities and all that, but what does that mean? Like right then and there, if you know anything about the story or the book, A Tale of Two Cities, if you know there's so much richness there that goes so beyond this scene where Spock gives Kirk a present for his birthday. Now, if you don't know anything about it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and where that winds up, it doesn't matter. You still get that Spock gave his friend an antique book because I know of your fondness for antiques, or whatever. And that's fine. But if you know that it was a very specific story that Nicholas Meyer picked. And when you're introduced to Chang in Star Trek VI, cry havoc and let's slip the dogs of war. Well, where's that from? I mean, astute viewers know it's probably Shakespeare. But do you know who said it? Mark Antony. Do you know why he said it? What are the dogs of war? You can infer what the dogs of war are. And when he says it, it's like, hey, he's going to go to war. He just means to go to war. Well, if you did a cursory glance, if you'd read the Shakespeare, obviously that would be the best way to know. But Mark Antony, according to poemanalysis.com, Antony uses the line as an expression of passion. Obviously, it conveys his anger over his friend's death, as well as a suggestion of what he wants to have happen next. It's believed that William Shakespeare took this quote from the life of Marcus Brutus, part of Plutarch's Lives of Noble Greeks and Romans. Well, all of a sudden, you've looked up cry havoc and let slip, and suddenly it's like, what is the life of Marcus Brutus, and what is Plutarch's lives of noble Greeks and Romans? You know, and suddenly, you know, you find out that all people know, cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war. But it's part of a much larger speech. Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers. Thou art the ruins of the noblest man that ever lived in the tide of times. Woe to the hand that shed this costly blood. Over thy wounds now I do prophecy, which like dumb mouths do ope their ruby lips, to beg the voice and utterance of my tongue. A curse shall light upon the limbs of men, domestic fury and fierce civil strife shall cumber all the parts of Italy. Blood and destruction shall be so in use, and dreadful objects so familiar, that mothers shall but smile when they behold their infants quartered with the hands of war, all pity choked with custom of fell deeds, and Caesar's spirit, raging for revenge, with 8 by his side come hot from hell, shall in these confines, with a monarch's voice, cry havoc, and let slip the dogs of war, that this foul deed shall smell above the earth. Come on, right? Star Trek 6, man. Suddenly you do a little research and already it's like, fuck yeah, dude, Mark Antony. He's pissed. So, you know, I just think that fandom is like, we get the richest stuff ever. You know, the idea that Boba Fett has a poncho because of Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name. And the Man with No Name exists because Sergio Leone was an Akira Kurosawa fan. You know? I mean, it's cool. So anyway, I thought I found this is kind of an interesting article. Now, this was from the New York Times, March 19th, 2015. It's by Greg Beto. And the headline is, Turning to Education for Fun. In a 2013 episode of 60 Minutes, Charlie Rose visits Bill Gates' office to get a sense of where the billionaire philanthropist draws intellectual inspiration. First, Mr. Gates shows Mr. Rose the Codex Leicester, a 500-year-old Leonardo da Vinci manuscript that Mr. Gates bought in 1994 for $30 million. Then, with just as much enthusiasm and nearly as much reverence, Mr. Gates leads Mr. Rose to a bookcase filled with DVDs from The Great Courses. I didn't even know this existed. It's just like what you would think. As the camera pans across various titles, Mr. Rose notes that Mr. Gates, a Harvard dropout, has now watched hundreds of hours of college lectures through these DVDs, which feature professors discussing, say, the search for the Higgs boson. Still, at just 200 or so volumes, Mr. Gates' collection was not nearly big enough to establish him as the world's greatest Great Courses collector. We just had somebody last month who bought the entire library, says Ed Leon, chief brand officer of the Great Courses. It's someone who seems to have made a lot of money in finance and retired to a tropical island. That's where we shipped the entire library. Over 500 courses. What does it mean when people who can afford to spend their time however they please hunker down in front of their flat screens to watch theoretical physicists or experts on other subjects lecture for hours? That's what YouTube is now, baby. Entertainment values have come to dominate many aspects of life, but another trend has been playing out too. Call it the academization of leisure. It can be found in the live streaming TED Talks lectures, the Great Courses, learning vacations, podcasts, science centers, brain training games, and retirement communities like Lassell Village in Newton, Massachusetts, whose residents must complete a minimum of 450 hours of learning and fitness activity each calendar year, its website says. These days, examples of what is often called edutainment are everywhere. As the word suggests, edutainment combines aspects of education and entertainment into products and experiences that seek to improve learning by making it not just painless, but also pleasurable. And while consumers will often pay prices that would please any Ivy League bursar, this kind of education is generally pursued on an elective basis with no credits or certifications at stake. Learning through entertainment dates at least to Ben Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac, which amused and instructed colonists with its mix of maxims, weather forecasts, math lessons, and puzzles. But traditionally, edutainment resulted from the kinds of things Neil Postman, by the way, you got to read this book. You all should read this book. A New York University professor and media theorist criticized in his 1985 book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. In it, he argued that culture's primary mode of discourse was shifting from print to TV, and that as a result, politics, religion, news, athletics, education, and commerce had all been transformed into congenial adjuncts of show business. In Mr. Postman's formulation of the world, show business alone did the encroaching. Lessons about multiplication were put to music. Come on, man. Come on, multiplication rock? How many people out there know the words to I'm Just a Bill? Yes, I'm only a bill. I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, Bill, now you're a law. I didn't know what a fucking conjunction was if I couldn't sing conjunction, junction, what's your function, and, but, nor. You know, I'm sorry that Schoolhouse Rock doesn't exist today. We'd probably have a pronoun song and I'd be able to understand what Z and Zer meant and keep it straight in my head. But there's nothing wrong with that, but he criticized it. Mr. Postman's formulation of the world, show business alone did the encroaching, but what is most notable about the current edutainment boom is how often it uses formats and techniques from education and academia to invade domains that were once primarily recreational or at least non-academic. In the old days, business people networked over martinis. Now they prepare to mingle by consuming multiple TED Talks lectures. Likewise, it sometimes seems as if no luxury vacation is complete without a concierge biologist on hand to decipher the mating habits of the mantled howler monkey. And thanks to farmers markets, picking up milk and eggs has turned into a chance for informal symposiums on pasture management. You know, in Woody Allen's movie Midnight in Paris, is it Midnight in Paris? There's a great character that who thinks he's as smart as he can opine on wine and art, and he really doesn't know anything that he's talking about. And it's Michael Sheen who plays that character. I always love that character. I love that movie because it has a lot to say about this. Finally, there's fare like the great courses and online learning sites such as lynda.com, creativelife.com, and edX.org. They're probably all gone now. Who knows? Such material is hardly fodder for channel surfers. The great courses, which also come in audio format. See, I didn't even know till I looked for this article today to do this show. I didn't even know there was something called the great courses, and because this is an 8-year-old article, it could be gone, replaced by Joe Rogan. Who knows? I don't know. The great courses feature a college professor lecturing from 12 to 24 hours on topics like ancient Mesoamerica or behavioral economics. The living room couch in front of the television now functions as a site for in-depth learning. Many factors underlie the ascent of such learning products. An aging population has leisure time and money to spend. Digital distribution lets content creators focus on smaller audiences with more specialized interests, and it gives users access to these products anywhere and anytime. See, the thing is, did I say who wrote this article? Greg Beto wrote this article for the New York Times on March 19th, 2015. Now, it's funny to read this because we all know this now. You know, now we're all, during the pandemic, what were we doing but watching Joe Rogan talk? Or a lot of people discovered people like, I guess, Jordan Peterson, the intellectual dark web, Brett Weinstein, people like that. I watch a lot of TED Talks because that was something new. And that was something YouTube has brought us over the last 8 years, these long-form discussions. You can tune in and hear what people have to say, and whether you agree with them or not, you know, you can get mad at somebody, but, you know, hopefully they're conveying information that benefits you. And I think that what I feel is being lost is the foundations of all this. And, you know, I hear a lot of people slamming like the great Western canon. And now it's fallen from favor because many people have said, well, only a certain type of person was in academia for so long, so let's invalidate the thousands of years of human history and human learning because of where it came from or who wasn't participating, which I always thought is silly because information's information. It doesn't really matter where it comes from. And anyway, I was like, I wonder if someone wrote an article about this. And lo and behold, they did. Quillette. I know people are like, oh, great, Rob. Quillette's right-leaning and it's conservative. Yes, it is. But it also has articles, just like Medium has articles, I look for articles, as you all know, everywhere. Don't care where they come from. Because these are just observations. This isn't Rob facts. Or this isn't Rob teaches you how you should think. I'm not teaching you I'm not telling you what you should believe. I'm just offering something you can think about, or you can turn it off. Or you might be bored to tears because I'm not talking about Ahsoka. But here, I found this article, and I thought it was really worth sharing. Because it was a summation of what I've been thinking about. So here it is. It's not a very long article. Our Lost Classical Learning. Now, this is written by Brian Kaler. This is from September 5th, 2023. And apparently Brian is an Irishman, and he's conservative. So that's where I got this article. So, don't turn off now, though. The Western canon was not an unchanging set of texts, but an ongoing conversation that lasted thousands of years, enabling each generation to build on the intellectual heritage of the past. Now, come on, knowing me, this was like right up my alley, right? Ancient Athens was perhaps the first state in history in which a substantial number of citizens were literate and ideas were able to circulate freely. Literacy eroded the gulf between rulers and ruled and made possible the creation of a radically new kind of human society. For perhaps the first time, every free man could criticize and question officials, and this was often portrayed as desirable and valuable. In literature, at least, soldiers could even question their commanders, as Creon's guards do in Sophocles' Antigone. These freedoms extended to some playwrights and actors themselves. The anti-war comedies of, I can't even pronounce his name, Aristophanes, were performed in the middle of the horrific Peloponnesian War. Playwrights often endowed menial workers, shepherds, farmers, guards, and messengers, with a common sense lacking in their rulers. As Victor David Hansen and John Heath put it, in Greek plays, the hero is so often the underdog, the troublemaker, the one who criticizes what everyone else blindly accepts. Ajax, Philocrates, Lysistrata, Electra, Prometheus, Antigone, he or she, and it was often a she, harshly condemned the leaders, the state, the people, and did so publicly on stage for everyone to see. The Romans kept these Greek writings alive and added their own contributions to the growing canon. As Rome's 1,000-year rule declined and barbarians burned cities and libraries across Europe, Christian monks and Muslim scholars copied and circulated the classics. As Seb Falk has shown, even peasants would sometimes pool their resources to hire monks to teach them in teaching halls, some of which later became the first universities. A classical education involved more than merely reading ancient texts. It meant learning to think critically and debate logically in the way pioneered by the Greeks. Medieval scholars were trained in these skills, and the legal, political, and scientific infrastructures of the West continue to assume such training. Obligations like jury duty and voting assume that ordinary citizens have an ability to assess logical arguments. Science assumes the ability to test theories. It's no coincidence that much of our legal and scientific terminology comes from Greek and Latin. The Western canon was not an unchanging set of texts, but an ongoing conversation that lasted thousands of years, enabling each generation to build on the intellectual heritage of the past. It gave people a set of cultural reference points: Homer, Socrates, Aristotle, Aquinas, Dante, Milton. Even in the medieval period, Europe had a culture. Milton. That's what Khan asked Kirk at the end of Space Seed. Do you know Milton? And Kirk's answer was, yes. And of course, other characters had to ask, I'm not familiar. For a good Scotsman, I'm not familiar with Milton. Anyway, again, Star Trek always busting out the literature. Anyway, don't mean to talk about Star Trek. Even in the medieval period, Europe had a culture that valued reading, even before the invention of the printing press in 1436. The first books to be printed after the Bible were Greek and Roman classics, and schools soon sprung up to teach them. There were 34 schools in Gutenberg's day, but by 1660 there were 444, one school every 12 miles. According to Neil Postman, that Greek and Roman history was familiar to such audiences is suggested by the confidence with which Shakespeare draws on it in plays like Coriolanus and Titus Andronicus. By the 18th century, even the backwater of rural Ireland, where Roman Catholics were prohibited from teaching, teachers formed underground networks to teach the classics, and children across Ireland secretly learned them. In his 1968 book, The Hedge Schools of Ireland, P.J. Dowling repeats reports by 18th century travelers of poor, ragged boys well acquainted with the best Latin poets. Good Latin scholars in the mountains of Kerry and wandering farmhands who conversed for a considerable time in Latin. Visiting Ireland in the 1840s, Johann George Cole reported that even poor farmers of country Kerry knew their Latin. In 1748, the Earl of Chesterfield wrote to his son that classical knowledge, that is Greek and Latin, is absolutely necessary for everybody. The word illiterate, in its common acception, means a man who is ignorant of these two languages. Acceptation. While Chesterfield may have had a somewhat restricted understanding of the word everybody here, many people who knew no Latin or Greek would still have been familiar with the classics through contemporary translations. Thanks to Alexander Pope's English version, quipped the satirists Thomas Burnet and George Duckett in 1715, every country milkmaid may understand the Iliad as well as you or I. While this is clearly hyperbole, in 1787, the Scottish poet Robert Burns reported meeting a gardener's wife who can repeat Pope's Homer from end to end. In 1788, at the age of 10, William Hazlitt was reading Ovid and Eutropius. I don't know Eutropius. During the Industrial Revolution, some working-class men and women organized clubs that provided not only lessons in reading and writing, but debating societies. According to historian Jonathan Rose, as many as a quarter of all male workers in Britain may have belonged to such clubs by the early 1800s, a number that may have risen as high as 80% by the end of the century. Some of these clubs produced their own periodicals, focusing on classical authors like Livy, Homer, and Tacitus. These were publications both for and by working people, and their pages were filled with articles and letters from coal miners, farmers, shepherds, and weavers. David Livingstone, the famous African explorer, worked 14-hour days in a cotton mill from the age of 10. According to a 19th century account of his life, he read the classics while at the machine and attended evening classes for 4 hours daily. Some Welsh miners who worked long hours doing dangerous work for low pay put what few coins they had left over from their meager earnings toward library memberships. These libraries were well stocked with Greek and Roman classics, and according to Rose, at one typical library, the average miner read 86 books a year. Familiarity with the classics gives you access to a galaxy of cultural references, since for 1,000 years paintings, speeches, poems, novels, and sculptures were all created for a public familiar with Greek and Roman works. The famous depiction of George Washington in a Roman toga, for example, portrays him as Cincinnatus, the leader who stepped away from the temptation of lifelong power to return to his farm, thereby providing an important model for presidential term limits and for the peaceful transfer of power. Right up until the mid-20th century, films, newspaper articles, novels, popular songs, and even children's rhymes referenced such classical figures as Horatius and Croesus, references that every mailman, farmhand, or construction worker was clearly expected to understand. In the 1930s, the Irish farmer Stephen Ryan was displaying his knowledge of the classics in his journal, published in 1946 as Green Fields, A Journey of Irish Country Life, in which he whimsically describes his village as scourged and whipped by every wind from west to east, by every fat-cheeked rogue that cares to puff. It is the blowball of Boreas, the fluff of Notius, the dead leaf of Eurus, and feather of Favonius, Argestes' fag, the bud of Chorus, and the teacup of the proverbial storm. I got to do some reading, man, because I don't know any of that. Children once began their Latin lessons by reading Julius Caesar's account of the wars in Gaul, which begins with the line, I can't even read Latin, all of Gaul is divided into 3 parts. As Wes Callahan has pointed out, the opening line was so well known that in Ernestine Gilbreth Carey's 1948 novel, Cheaper by the Dozen, which we know, the writer jokes that Father, like Gaul, was divided into 3 parts. Even in American football, classical references abounded. The Yale football cheer was Breck X Co X Co X, which is nonsense unless you've read Aristophanes' The Frogs. Many reformers and rebels were inspired by the Greeks, some of whom central creation myths involve rebellion. Zeus defying Kronos and Prometheus rebelling against the gods to bring the fire of knowledge to humanity. I can't pronounce this, but Toussaint L'Ouverture read Plutarch's gripping account of Spartacus's uprising before he led the first successful slave rebellion in Haiti in 1791. Martin Luther King quoted Ovid, Plato, and St. Augustine. Thomas Hobbes recommended that any leader with aspirations to become a totalitarian dictator should ban Greek and Roman authors. Any university, courthouse, building, or statue from before the 20th century is likely to contain an engraving in Latin. These were not designed to be some arcane incantations like the quasi-Latin spells recited by the wizards in Harry Potter, but direct messages to a public that could read them and cared what they said. We are rapidly losing this ability, and it will greatly impoverish our understanding of who we are. Amen. I thought that was a great piece, and it goes a long way to what I've been thinking about. You know, having conversations. I mean, it's silly to me sometimes to think about how much time I spend talking about Star Wars or Star Trek or Marvel or take your pick. I mean, admittedly, I personally have spent a lot of time thinking about these things since I was a little kid. But sometimes I think to myself, maybe it's a little too much, but at least I'm interested in other things. Now, this was really interesting. You know, just coming across things as I was prepping. I do prep for these little chats just to fill my head with this stuff, and I found something that was really interesting. Booker T. Washington, a former slave, Booker T. Washington had this quote, and I love this quote. I had the feeling that to get into a schoolhouse would be about the same as getting into paradise. He was a former slave, and that's what he thought about getting into a schoolhouse just to learn, just to read books. Even as a young slave boy, Booker T. Washington wanted to go to school and learn. Long before the emancipation, many African Americans had wanted a basic education. Free blacks, some of them former slaves, had opened schools as early as 1807. Despite laws prohibiting slaves from learning to read and write, some managed to teach themselves. Still, most slaves had their first chance for schooling only after emancipation. After the Civil War, there was a movement to educate the newly freed slaves, but most blacks, even youngsters, had to work to help to support themselves. For many, an education was still more than a dream. Was still more a dream than a reality. But Booker T. Washington said, "From the time that I can remember having any thoughts about anything, I recall that I had an intense longing to read." That's what Booker T. Washington said. He had to work to help support his family, and he pleaded with his stepfather to attend school, who allowed Booker to attend only after he agreed to work before and after school. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. I have a lot of letters from you, good, bad. I've been delivering some banger letters from all you. You've been saying a lot of stuff. Let me see what anybody has in the super chats or tips. The link to tips is in the description below. R.J. McCready. Who is that? Who played him? Who directed the movie? I mean, R.J. McCready. Could it be Kurt Russell? Could it be, I don't know, Jack Nicholson? I'll let you decide. Rob, have you read The Last Ronin, the Ninja Turtles comic run? By the way, love the shirt. Got one myself. Yeah, got this on Facebook. I have not. You know, I have to tell you, I don't really read individual comic runs. I mean, I if I hear the run's good, I'm usually like 2 years behind. As a matter of fact, I just got a box from Cheap Graphic Novels. I got a bunch of Absolute editions and some omnibuses. And that's all I collect. Unfortunately, but I'm always looking for new stuff that's I'm a snob. Give it to me in hardcover and I'll read it. Is it in hardcover? Because I'll read it. 904 says, by the way, R.J. McCready is in fact Kurt Russell in the thing. R.P. McMurphy is Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. 904 is a new member. Thanks, 904. Echo Base Network says, R.I.P. Cardinal Sin? What? Wait. What? I didn't hear about that. Okay, let's put a pin in that and come to that later. What happened? Anyway, 1001 Johnny sends in a $20 tip and says, I'm not Republican, Democrat, or whatever else. I grew up outside of the U.S. and I don't want to identify as either because both sides ignore each other. To use the phrase ignorantly from Catcher in the Rye, you're all phonies. You're real, Rob. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I always like chatting with you and talk about somebody who knows a lot about Ultraman and that kind of thing. You are the man. Well, I have letters. And by the way, that doesn't mean I won't read tips or super chats, but I have letters. And you can write letters to me for free, and I will read them because they're great. This is interesting. This letter comes to me from Tony Oliver. Now, Tony Oliver has been a longtime watcher of the channel. And on a member call, the last member call we did, and Roberto can't do the member call Saturday, so we're talking about rescheduling it. But so the last member call, in the middle of the member call, all the power went out. It's not because we didn't pay our bill. All the power went out in the whole neighborhood. And we were about an hour and a half, 90 minutes in. And the way our member calls work is anybody who's a member of the channel, even if you're 99 cents a month, every other week we have a chat. And these chats last for hours. And it's me and talking to you, and you guys can talk and ask me whatever you want. And it's fun because I've gotten to know a lot of people. We've been having these now for years. So Tony Oliver had come into this member chat, and he was waiting to talk and make a presentation, and the power went out. And I thought that was the end of the member chat. So I left. The power didn't come on here for like 2 hours. And then Tom Jr. Jackson, I was like, hey, Tom, are you guys still chatting? And there were still people in the member chat. And if anyone was there, we did try and get Tony to respond. And, there was stuff going on in the background. He was talking to other people. I didn't know what was going on with Tony. I didn't know what he wanted, and I wasn't aware. But he was not pleased that he did not get to speak and say his piece. So he wrote a letter. This might be my ego talking, but I'm pretty sure I saw you read Football Frequency 7979 respond to your comment about new filmmakers during the Jeffrey Morris talk last night. I forget his name unless I didn't. I don't remember Football Frequency. I was really concentrating on Jeffrey and what we were talking about, but we did talk about where are the new filmmakers, because I'm frankly surprised at how few up-and-coming filmmakers there are that I see in the indie space. Because now the technology, and as an example, what do I mean by that? Well, the two brothers that made Talk to Me, the Australian horror movie about the hand, they cut their teeth making YouTube, TikTok, online social media videos, and they hone their craft. I mean, we have the most advanced technology right now. You can make a feature film, and Steven Soderbergh's done it. High Flying Bird, Unsane, he made with iPhones. Tangerine, The movie Tangerine was made with iPhones. iPhones now you have camera mounts for iPhones. You can do anything you want. And if you are talented and know how to make movies, and you do things like, record sound externally, probably on using really nice mics, and you could theoretically make a film that could rival any other film with technology that's available off the shelf, if you have the talent to do it. So that's what we're talking about. Now, Tony goes on to say, I don't give a fuck how many followers an Overlord DVD has. That's Doomcock. I'm not the coward who wouldn't show up. I don't know if he's referring to me or not. To be honest, I question whether or not Josiah Rises is Doomcock and that it wasn't drama to advertise your channel. I was on your last Midnight Metal. If someone asks me to speak up, I do. I know that you had a would-be filmmaker in your members chat last week. Well, I didn't know that at the time. I don't know what anybody's going to talk to me about in our member chat. I found that out later because other people told me you wrote to them. You didn't write to me, I don't think, directly, which you can. I know that you had a would-be filmmaker in your member chat last week. I got turned away. I got pissed. I got muted in Discord during my lack of opportunity to create Discord, complained, then received a weak and incapable response from Mike Bodden. Now, I disagree with that characterization. I thought the fact that Mike took the time to write a nice, thoughtful letter to you, I thought was good. Now, over a week later, you are inquiring, where are all the new filmmakers? That comes off as the opposite of authentic, and I think it's bullshit. Okay, the question remains, though. Where are the new filmmakers? Unrelated, but when I was homeless 14 years ago, I hid DVD sets so they wouldn't be taken from me. Many of them were DVDs that you worked on. You don't have 100 people online combined who are as capable of ripping you a new one as the fan you had in me. Kids don't meet your heroes. To answer your question, I'm going to be one of those filmmakers. You just don't know that yet. Okay, there's a lot going on here, Tony. And I understand, but I just want to say that when we do member chats, it's a shoot the shit conversation. It's not. Here's the thing, and I've said this before. I can't legally listen to pitches. I can't look at presentations that are what are called unsolicited. And as a professional, if you want to be a professional, you got to learn to understand this. So here's the thing: if I were to read everybody's scripts that want to send me scripts, I have a production company. I've made films. Let's say you write a movie about, I don't know, a beach ball, the journey one beach ball makes across the beaches of the world. I don't know if anyone would make that movie, but let's just say you did. And you had sent me this script, and then I read it. I don't choose to move forward on it, and then 10 years later, someone else has this idea about, what if we used a beach ball as a metaphor about society? And I got involved in this project, and it got made. Somebody who sent me that script 10 years ago could say, you stole my idea about that beach ball. Well, to alleviate that problem, you either have to get material sent to you from an agency or someplace that's reputable, that is a buffer, so the agency protects their clients, and it also protects the producers. If the agency sends you a story, then you can look at it because the agency would take the heat. And that's if it doesn't come from an agency. Now, as an independent filmmaker and somebody that isn't represented by an agency, in order to read a script that someone sends me, you would have to sign a release form that releases me of any kind of liability. That's going to say, it doesn't matter. If you want to send me your script, I am free from all liability if you ever choose to sue me in the future. You can't, because you've signed that form. Now, I don't really understand the anger that you have in here about this letter. I mean, I'm happy to talk to you. We're going to have another member call. But I don't understand what you think. Where are all the new filmmakers? Tony, if you have a film to show me, I'll watch your movie. But if you don't have a film, I don't know what you're upset about. I mean, you want to be, you say here at the end, I'm going to be one of those filmmakers. You just don't know that yet. I more power to you, sir. I mean, I would say I can't wait to see your movie. Go make it. And I'll be the first in line to watch it. You want to show me the trailer, I'll premiere it on Robservations. Whatever you want to do. The thing is, there's a lot of people that talk about making movies. It's really fucking hard, which is why a lot of people don't make them. And I think the reason that there aren't a lot of as many new filmmakers today, I mean, there's still lots of emerging filmmakers, but I thought there would have been hundreds, thousands. Like when Francis Ford Coppola was mentioning that he had a little girl who's going to be the next Orson Welles. But the fact is, you know why there's not? It's the same reason why there's not a bunch of great bands like Led Zeppelin or, I don't know, whatever. Who's your favorite band? Because it's really hard. And most people give up. And most people, frankly, aren't talented enough to make it to a certain level where you see their material. And yet now, there's more ways to get your material shown than ever before. And I'm the first person to champion someone's work. That's why I can't wait to see Jeffrey Morris's. I've actually worked on some of his projects. He's incredibly talented. So, I don't know, Mike wrote you back a letter, and I still don't quite understand what you're mad at me about, or why you're angry. I don't understand that. I mean, our member chats that we do are not places to present your material. If you wanted to present your material to me, you'd have I would certainly look at it, but I don't. Now, over a week later, you're inquiring where are all the new filmmakers. That comes off as the opposite of authentic. I think it's bullshit. I'm going to be one of those filmmakers. Again, that's great. Where's your movie? Show me the work. Can't wait to see it. But I don't know why you're mad. I really don't. I mean, I'm encouraging of anybody to go make a movie. So Tony, can't wait to see your film. Let's make it. Let's see it, because I would like to watch it. And it's funny though. To alleviate that problem, if you're going to be one of those filmmakers, make the movie. And I'm happy to watch it. I'm happy to promote it. Whatever you want to do. And I can't wait to see it. Honestly, I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see a lot of emerging filmmakers. I always wish that they're great. At least I hope so. Let's see. Now I'll read another one. Marina. This letter's from Marina. I love the name Marina. Marina writes, our subject headline is Our Love for You. I hope this is, I haven't read this letter, so I don't know what it's about. Hello, Viceroy. My name is Marina. I'm a regular listener to your channel alongside my brother. We have a mutual love for movies, and your channel has deepened it to a newer level. We also have quite different taste. He loves Denis Villeneuve and Zack Snyder, and I prefer artists like Jim Jarmusch. By the way, Only Lovers Left Alive is the best vampire movie. Only Lovers Left Alive, I don't know if it's the best vampire movie, but it's a great vampire movie, and I love it. I mean, Jim Jarmusch, all the way back to, I think the first Jim Jarmusch movie I saw was Down by Law. And Ghost Samurai, Way of the Warriors, coming out in 4K. I did not like his zombie movie. I'm just saying. I was not quite fond of Denis Villeneuve's Dune. While technically a good movie, it was very cold. It was just edited so harshly, there was absolutely no room for the movie to breathe, no time to feel anything for the characters. And it made me a little angry because Denis is a great director, Incendies and Arrival were fantastic. Okay. Marina, you nailed it. As much as I love watching Dune and the technical specs, the verisimilitude, the sound design, some of the best ever done. Every scene is cut to the bone. I totally agree with you. I think it's a good movie, but it's like watching the Cliff's Notes of the actual movie that you're watching. Because I know the book so well, and I know Lynch's movie, and I know even the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, those scenes are cut to the bone for time. I'm like, dude, I would have sat there for 3.5 hours. Everybody would have sat there for 3.5 hours. A lot of people would say, Rob, it was already too long and boring. I love that movie, and all the stuff that was cut out of it, they shouldn't cut out of it. But the scenes are edited so close to the bone because of length that the movie, I think, is irrevocably harmed. And I love it. I love it. But my God, there's not one scene in that movie you can really enjoy because it's all moving the plot along and there's so much plot. You don't have enough time to stop and go, oh my God, that was a great scene. I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. I have a similar problem with Zack Snyder. While I do think Man of Steel is a genuine masterpiece, I, unlike my brother, am very mixed on his other projects. I love you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay because I love Man of Steel, and I wouldn't say the same thing about Sucker Punch, although I do have hot toys from Sucker Punch. And of course, him being a fan, your brother, he listens to every interview Zach gives, and sometimes I listen with him. He seems like such a nice guy, but what angers me with Zack Snyder, when he talks about superheroes or, for example, Watchmen, his analysis is profound. I never thought of him as a great intellect, but when you hear him explain the mythology, I was positively surprised, and that made me even angrier. I know there's a great director in him. I feel he gets in his own way. While I think Watchmen was a fine movie, I was baffled by how inconsistent it was. One scene I was thinking, wow, only a genius could have directed this. And the next scene, it felt like a hollow representation of the comic. Again, Marina, where were you when I was in high school and college? Well, actually, there was a Marina when I was in high school and college. But you're not her. But you could have been her because they're talking my language. But I'll tell you, look, Watchmen's one of my favorite comics. And I feel that Zach did a really good job of translating the comic to a movie like he did with 300, but he missed the gist of what the comic was actually about. And his music choices. I mean, I'll give you an example. So in Watchmen, in the Vietnam sequence, when you see Dr. Manhattan helping the Americans win the Vietnam War, and then there's the very memorable scene in the bar afterwards where the comedian ends up killing a woman who says that he got her pregnant, and Dr. Manhattan doesn't stop his bullet. Very memorable scene from the comic. But if you remember, when that scene is established, you're listening to Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries from Apocalypse Now. Dun 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 dun. And I'm like, wait a minute. So in this movie, in this Vietnam sequence, which you're supposed to accept as whatever the experience of Vietnam was in the universe of Watchmen, which is not our universe, it's a different universe, you're playing a piece of music that is evocative of one movie in particular, Francis Coppola's Apocalypse Now, which, by the way, it's Hearts of Darkness. It's Conrad's Hearts of Darkness. So you're borrowing a piece of music from Apocalypse Now, and when I saw that, it pissed me off because it wasn't his to use for Vietnam. It was bizarre. He did the same thing with Sound of Silence. Hello, darkness, my old friend. The choices of music are so fixed with other movies and mean other things. I'm like, Zach, why are you, in your Vietnam sequence, which has a very interesting point to make, why are you evoking Apocalypse Now, which is another pop culture reference where you've now undercut your entire Vietnam sequence? Because I'm thinking about, frankly, a better movie than yours, where they used real helicopters and filmed in the Philippines. I mean, it was a weird choice, and I think that Zack Snyder does that a lot. I don't think and Watchmen does a great job of recreating famous scenes in the movie from the comic. Beautiful. But I think the meaning behind Watchmen is lost. And I'll tell you something. The Watchmen comic is as much a meta-commentary on the entire medium of comic books as anything else. And that's not in the movie at all. And if you watch the extended version, you have the Tales of the Black Freighter material, the animated stuff, which is animated because the kid's reading a comic book. And how does that work? Because there are no superhero comics. That's why pirate comics are big. It's like, what's going on here? It doesn't work. I mean, I understand what they're trying to do, but you're translating a kid who's reading a comic book into an animated sequence that's supposed to represent a comic book that he's reading. So why is it animated? It's very odd. And I think that I think Zach's a really nice guy. I think a lot of his material is rather surfacey. But he's great at evoking, you know what? I'll tell you something. To me, Zack Snyder is I don't know if this reference will mean anything to you, but Vans were big in the 70s when I was a little kid. And like Vans, a lot of them had like Frazetta art or Boris Vallejo art, these fantasy depictions that you'd see on the covers of heavy metal records. Zack Snyder is like a good van painter, maybe the best van painter. If I could equate him, his directorial style is, when you looked at, and this is the thing is, great van artwork was fucking awesome. It was great. You'd see, giant monsters fighting whatever, men in chainmail with Conan, whatever it was. I mean, it was badass. That's what Zack Snyder does. I don't think that there's much underneath all that. And nor should there be. He's painting in broad strokes. The gods are coming down from the sky. He's not gonna get into the nuances of Lois and Clark's relationship when they get home. It's not gonna be that. Zack Snyder wants to see the van painting of Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman fighting Doomsday. There's a place for that in the world too. And I like it. I'm there for it. When he makes Sucker Punch, it doesn't work. Although there's a lot of people that will. I've read some really great, even on this show, really great treatises about what Sucker Punch is really all about. And I'm almost convinced. I just don't think that Zack Snyder knew about that when he was making the movie. He knew some of it, certainly. But I agree. As you say, wow, only a genius could have directed this. In the next scene, it felt like a hollow representation of the comic. Amen. Debates with my brother were greatly influenced by you. You made our relationship closer, and I owe you so much for that. That's very nice of you to say. I am also sometimes disappointed seeing you defending some of the more toxic channels on YouTube. While I do agree that one can be friends with everyone, but you're such an intellectual person, it baffled me how you would never say anything to these guys. There were so many insults thrown toward creators and minorities, calling trans people mentally retarded, calling Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Brie Larson feminist bitches, oftentimes while you're on a stream with them. I don't remember people saying those kinds of things, because I do. Look, I object. Here's the thing. People can believe whatever they want to believe. And I'll stream with people that are friends of mine whose opinions I don't agree with. I don't think we have to necessarily be derogatory to make your point. That I don't like. And, I think even when I've gone on certain channels, people have even said to me, we had to tone down the rhetoric because you were here. And I've appreciated that. Look, I don't think, a lot of people take me to task for this. I try and talk to all kinds of different people. It's funny, I never get, oh, that's not true. I have a good letter about Jeffrey Morris. But, I don't tend to, of all the people I brought on this channel, I don't tend to have people write in letters about how much they liked a speaker that I've had that I brought on. But no, look, again, I'm not my brother's keeper. I'm not even here to police even the people that I know, because I don't watch every stream they do. And I understand. And I do think though, that there are points to be made about the way certain things are going and how things are. I think that I'm all about storytelling integrity. And I think storytelling integrity, it seems silly to say, but since I'm not here opining about philosophy or economics or whatever. I'm here talking about science fiction, fantasy, and horror in all of its myriad forms. And I can say that what I do not like is how storytelling is being perverted by certain people. Alex Kurtzman said it, that he's going to use Star Trek as a storytelling device to deliver his message. What I think is so strange is that there are people that think that they have a message to deliver. True and honest stories, again, the great stories give you things to think about. They don't tell you what to think. I mean, a great author will try and get you to come around to a certain way of thinking by giving you a great story that makes you think or will take you in the direction that author wants you to go. But the author's not didactic. Good authors aren't going, you need to feel this way. See, if you don't, you're a bad person. And there's a lot of that going on now. And I think, and the desire, I think, for a lot of these people is a good one. You know, that people, they want to show that they're aware that there are many marginalized voices that have not been allowed to be heard over the years. And I'm the first person to say, bring those voices on. I want to read and experience stories that I haven't heard from people that I haven't heard from before. I want to know the stories of marginalized people who have never heard a voice. Tell me a story I haven't heard. Tell me your plight. Let me understand you. That's kind of the point of this entire channel, by the way. But I don't like it when those stories are delivered in such a way where they are, the storyteller has taken a position that they know better than their audience because they're just as bad as anyone else then. You know, it's really weird. I mean, it's as I've gotten older, like I like who I am at this age. I feel more comfortable in my own skin than I've ever felt in my life. And yet, there are more and more and more people on the internet that are vitriolic when dealing with me, which I find amusing. But that's just the way of the world. So it doesn't, I let it slide off my back, or slide off my shoulders. But it's but let me finish the letter. But I understand. You go on to say, that did hurt me, meaning I was on streams with people. That did hurt me. And while I do not condone the hate you get for having friends like that, in some way I understand it. You are so loved, Robert, and offer a home for everyone on your channel. We feel safe and welcomed here. That is why they probably reacted the way they did, seeing you just nodding and smiling. While so much harassment is being thrown toward minorities, it hurt people. Critique can be given without the need to humiliate someone on a personal level. I can 100% agree with that. I hope I did not upset you with this letter. I truly love you and your community, and I am eternally grateful. Well, Marina, and it's not just because your name is Marina, your letter is exactly the kind of letter that I love to get. You can throw me a little bit of praise, but you can also give me a little tough love, and you're not wrong. But I would say that, my shows, and this is the 888th Robservations, and all the other shows whining about movies, Let's Get Physical Media, Midnight Musings, Midnight Metal, the shows that RM is doing, the shows that King Tannic is doing, Que Pasa PGS. This channel represents me and my beliefs, and the people the people that are on this channel also do as well. And so I would say, to know where I'm coming from, this channel is a perfect example of what that is. And I try and put my money where my mouth is, although it's not much money, but giving other people a platform, even in Spanish, is something I'm very proud of. So, but thank you this is a very nice letter, and thank you for sending it. I very, very much appreciate it. Here's a letter that comes from Terrell Williams. Jeffrey Morris and Space 1999. This refers back to Jeffrey Morris's appearance on the show last night. To yesterday, he launched his Kickstarter to make a dream documentary project of his that I'm behind 100%. Jeffrey Morris and Space 1999. This is again from Terrell Williams, who says, another amazing Robservations. And Rob, on behalf of all black communities across planet Earth, wow, thank you for bringing Mr. Jeffrey Morris into our light. A true inspiration indeed. The Eagle has always been one of my favorite fictional sci-fi spaceships, and Season 1 of Space 1999 was really great. The second season, not so much. I agree with you. We park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. And yes, the episode Dragon's Domain messed me up as a kid in 1975. Laugh out loud. Could Dragon's Domain have worked as an original Trek series episode in 1968? Oh yeah, especially if it was Lieutenant Uhura flashback story. Looking forward to seeing this Academy Award-winning documentary. Come on, sci-fi fans, let's make this happen. Thanks again, Rob, and thanks for reading my future letters. Well, Terrell, thank you so much for writing in. You know, it's amazing when people put fingers to keyboard. I'm always amazed that people write in, and you know, it's really interesting. Sometimes, like, I've known Jeffrey for a long time, and Jeffrey has a past Prince. He's a big Prince fan. We're basically the same age. He has a great he's actually a quite talented artist, and he's a really, really good filmmaker, and he really knows his stuff. And he's been talking about new filmmakers. He's been making things. He's made an animated film that was an adaptation of a graphic novel he published. He made 30 minutes of what he wanted to be. 30 minutes of what should have been a Sci-Fi Channel movie or a streaming film, and it's beautifully made. It's incredibly well done, and he couldn't get any traction on it. And he's frustrated. But it's interesting that you say all black communities around the world, because, again, Jeffrey's just a friend of mine, and we talked a little bit about race last night, but I don't think of Jeffrey as a black filmmaker. He's just my friend who's a filmmaker. But I love hearing you say that, though, because this is another thing that representation, you forget. People don't even understand what representation can matter because they're not even thinking about it because they've never had to. So when you see someone like Jeffrey Morris, who's an incredibly articulate, talented, knowledgeable human being, I can understand that he represents something that could mean something. And so it's great to hear that you think that. But I think everybody should go support the documentary for no other reason than I want to watch it. So I can't wait to watch it. So go support him. Here's a letter that comes from Tucker Flynn. Tucker Flynn says, Rob, I'm a huge fan of pop music. It may not have as much depth as Pink Floyd, Kendrick Lamar, or whoever your favorite musician is, but what it does have is pure entertainment value. It's a team of musical engineers, producers, songwriters, executives, marketing, and PR specialists, all working behind the scenes to ultimately prop up the performer. The very inception of the art is inherently collaborative, not just the production of it. And in my opinion, the process leads to some of the best music from a phonoaesthetic perspective. I've never encountered that word before. I love that word, phonoaesthetic perspective. Phonoaesthetic is the word. And while some people may criticize pop music for essentially being an amalgamation of all genres, this mishmash of sounds and technologies from other songs is exactly what makes it so interesting to me. It seems this process has seeped into filmmaking, but is having the opposite effect. Great films, creative inception generally exists solely within the mind of their auteur. Of course, the actual production process of the movie will be wholly collaborative. It's impossible to make a large-scale film without it, but the best films in general have been great because the creative control was given solely to one person, or a small group of people, who conceived the project. Sure, having a singular voice for a film could potentially lead to less people being able to relate to it, but the people that do connect to it will connect to it in an infinitely more than a film that has many fingerprints all over it. That is essentially a mishmash of every other film ever made. The pop music of cinema. So generalized that anyone can relate to it, but no one really does. It seems in some ways Hollywood is approaching a point of no return. A point where all of the people who had ever worked in a version of Hollywood that functioned properly will no longer be in the industry. And where all of the ones who remain look at the one instance of this film popification working, the MCU, and endlessly try and replicate it. But the overall quality of film will continue to suffer until Hollywood remembers what made them great in the first place. Artists with a vision, and the conviction to make it true. It will suffer until Hollywood remembers that film is not pop music. Also, Rob, fuck the Seahawks, go Rams. Well, Tucker, first of all, thanks for writing in. That's very funny. I think you're right, though. And I want to point out that pop music, great pop music in itself is an art form. You know, and it's a very, look, as much as I joke about this, the first time I ever heard Blackpink, and yes, I understand, 3 hot Korean girls and Lalisa, who's Thai. the first Blackpink song I ever heard was Boombayah or Boombayah. And I loved it, not because the hot Asian girls, but I'm not going to lie, as a fan of women of the East. Actually, I'm a fan of pretty much all women, all women everywhere, every shape, size, color, creed. But what I loved about that song was that was a great pop confection. And if you go look up the video for Boombayah. That was the first thing I'd heard. I'd heard about BTS, and I knew a lot about K-pop, but I was not well versed in K-pop. But one day I went on a BTS jag, and I as I was doing this to understand what BTS was and how they were penetrating into America, and this is what I do. I'm just thinking about what is this? If I don't know about it, so I can have a general working knowledge of pop culture. That's to be on the show. I don't think I could do the show if I didn't. And when I watched that song, I'm like, not only were the visuals captivating, it was the production of the sound. I mean, clearly you're not looking at you're not looking at the Beatles of K-pop. This is an entirely manufactured confection, but the production of it all, the way the four girls have different, they do different things. There's one's a rapper, Lisa, and I don't know why, I just love her. I know I'm a dirty old man. I apologize, but come on. What are you supposed to think when you're watching a Blackpink? I did not go to their concert. I couldn't go that far. But I wanted to go to the Blackpink concert because I really was curious about, because it seems to me like even when you're going to go to a concert, it's not like you're going to have them break into an acoustic set. Maybe they do. But because Blackpink and all K-pop is so produced, it doesn't seem like, I don't think it's going to be like Amy Mann sitting there on a stage with her guitar playing when Blackpink's in their 60s. I don't see that happening. But that's okay, because within the paradigm of pop music, it works. But it's completely corporatized. It's completely controlled. It's a product like Coca-Cola to be sold worldwide. I get it. The thing about movies is they've turned into that. And it's funny because I read a lot of like Puck and all these online, there's a whole genre of online newsletters about the entertainment business that you have to subscribe to, that they're expensive. And it's weird because they all kind of came up at the same time. There's like 5 or 6 of them, but there's a lot of they've now been talking a lot about the deep state in Hollywood. And the deep state is made up of powerful agents and managers and people with a lot of money. Like, I imagine if there's like a Hollywood deep state, somebody like David Geffen is sitting at the top of it, or something like that. But the idea of a deep state in Hollywood is something that I'd never really thought about before. But clearly there is. The problem with Hollywood, and like you say, the popification of Hollywood, is happening because now Hollywood is no longer, it's all about global markets. You have to make movies that appeal to the masses. And the problem is, you're absolutely right. You're trying to make a pop movie confection that appeals to the world. Now, the thing is, what has happened is because of this Wall Street thinking and the corporate thinking, they want to be able to make movies the same way they'd make a product. So you can look at a spreadsheet and go, okay, we need this. And that's where all this IP thinking comes from. Oh, well, we have these IPs, and all we have to do is make them. What they're missing, what the spreadsheets are missing, what the corporate boardrooms are missing, is they don't understand that there's a lot of art. There's art involved. Like, the Indiana Jones franchise was not created to be a pop confection. The Indiana Jones franchise came from 2 guys at the time in 1980 or 79 when they were conceiving of all this, and when they went out and made it. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were the 2 most successful film directors in the world. And with their friend Philip Kaufman, Lucas wanted to make the story about this adventurer, the archaeologist adventurer. It came from 2 guys. They weren't looking at spreadsheets. They weren't trying to figure out, okay, what does the audience want? If they tried to do that, Indiana Jones, do you think an audience, if you went out, listen, we've got these two guys, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and they're going to make, they want to make we know you like Star Wars and Jaws, but they want to make a movie about a globe-trotting archaeologist, and Tom Selleck is going to play him. Would you be interested? I know you're a 25-year-old mother of two. Was this something you'd be excited in? It never would have got made. But that's where Hollywood is right now. The gatekeepers, the agents and managers and all the people that you have to go through to get anything done, they don't know what's getting made, and even if they don't know what should get made, and even if they did, they're never gonna tell you because it can't be wrong. So what happens is there's a lot of, filmmakers that are out there that if you just gave them the money and let them go make their movie, they'd probably make you something like the kids who made Talk to Me and make good money. There's a lot of really talented filmmakers. I even consider myself one of them. That give me. I want to get a project off the ground that's $8 million. It's something I want to make for 20 years. I know every shot that I want to shoot. I know everybody I want to be in this movie. It's a movie that's set in Seattle in 1999. That's based on a book, and no one. Where am I? The only thing that's stopping me is the money. If I had $8 million, if somebody deposited $8 million in an escrow account for me tomorrow, you know what I would do? If I woke up tomorrow morning and at 7 a.m. saw that there's $8 million in my bank account, I would start making the movie. I'd make phone calls to all the actors. I'd book them because I know who I want them to be. I'd call the people that I want to collaborate with because the soundtrack is a big part of it. I'd call them all up. By the end of tomorrow, if I had $8 million in the bank, by the end of tomorrow, I would have my movie cast. I would have my movie on the launch pad. I'd probably have to do 8 weeks of pre-pro, and I'd go shoot it. And not only would I go shoot it, I'd give myself, it'd be tough because I want to go up to Seattle and shoot it. I wouldn't have to shoot the whole thing, but I'd probably have to do a week or two, give myself 2, but a week in Seattle at least to go shoot where I want to shoot. But I could have the movie soup to nuts 6 months. I could do that myself. No one's going to fucking give me $8 million to do that. No one would ever believe that that's even possible. Because there's no kind of thinking that way. And I've only directed one movie in my life that was 25 years ago. No one would care. They'd be like, well, wait a minute, Rob. So you produced Tango Shalom, you edited Tango Shalom, you were the VFX supervisor and the post supervisor, and you oversaw everything to... Yes. Nobody understands that. Nobody in the business understands that. It does not compute, which is why I'm not making this movie. And people, everybody's going to see when they read the script, they're going to, and everyone read the script and they would tell me why that you should change this. I know this because I tried to make this movie 20 years ago and it wasn't the right time to make it. But people told me, a lot of the people told me this one particular instance, how they wanted it to be changed. I'm like, if you did that, it wouldn't be the movie that it is. It's not a life and death movie. As I call it, it's the coming of age story of a 36-year-old. but that's the way things are. That people just don't know. And they can't know. And the Wall Street thinking there's too much money at stake. I mean, you can't like Tony Oliver, well, where's all the new filmmakers? The problem is it's no longer enough. Here's the real problem too. When you think about the independent film explosion that happened in the late 80s, people like Spike Lee and Steven Soderbergh, which led to people like Kevin Smith and Quentin Tarantino and all of those filmmakers that kind of rose up, or even people like now Alexander Payne, and I can't wait to see his new movie, by the way. All of that world is different now, and it's not the way that it was. And nowadays, because movies are a lot more expensive and they're a lot more expensive to market, so having a career, you're Colin Trevorrow and you make Safety Not Guaranteed, and then you make Jurassic World as your second movie. It's a very strange place to be. Very strange place to be. But a great letter. And thank you about that. Thank you for that. This letter, let's see. This is a good one. Thomas Alvin writes, the increasing magical qualities of Star Wars. Ooh. Now I have to download this. Hang on a second. This is a long letter. Now that I'm looking at this, but we're gonna go through it together, because why not? I mean, somebody took the time to write it. Not just somebody, but Thomas Alvin took the time to write this, and let's read it. Hello, Rob. I've recently become a member of your PGS community, though I admit to have listened to your observations for a few years or so. I've always found your reflections to be honest, considerate, insightful, and often inspirational. I occasionally try to write myself, and your shows are in many ways a testament to the beauty and joy of the creative process, whatever it may lead to. That's very nice of you to say, sir. I wanted to write you about something I've been thinking about for a long time concerning Star Wars, but I haven't seen it addressed anywhere. Admittedly, I haven't heard or read everything out there about Star Wars, so I might be mistaken. It's about the increasing magical qualities of Star Wars. Let me explain. Like you, I grew up with the original trilogy. I'm born in 1975, so I was too young to see the first two movies upon release, but they were both re-released in cinemas, at least in my home country of Sweden, in anticipation of Return of the Jedi. So I did see them both in the theater. Return of the Jedi was the first movie I ever remembered looking forward to. I'd seen the first two, and now I was excited to see how it would continue. To this day, Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie, though I agree that Empire is the best. I could write at length about being a Star Wars fan in the early 80s, but will instead move on with the point. Maybe the subject of another email. In the original trilogy, the Force is a very spiritual concept. It resides everywhere and in all beings. Some people can master it to perform extraordinary, often heroic things, even though Darth Vader proclaims that even the Death Star is insignificant next to the power of the Force. The Force does not seem to dominate everything that's going on in the galaxy, but present it as something very personal. The Force has strong philosophical elements and somewhat Buddhist qualities. A lot of Yoda's teaching in Empire is about a certain way to think and see the world. Since the original trilogy, I feel like Star Wars has become increasingly magical in a Dungeons and Dragons kind of way. Note, I'm a huge fan of fantasy and role-playing games, so nothing wrong with Dungeons and Dragons. This started already before the new movies during the Dark Age in the late 80s and 90s with the different expanded universe iterations. A lot of lore was being added to Star Wars, which is understandable. Fans want to know more about everything, including the Force. The history of the Force, different Force traditions and wielders, the secrets of the Jedi and the Sith, and with that came a lot of new concepts and paraphernalia. I might be mistaken, but I think that the holocrons, the mystical objects where Jedi or Sith teachings are stored, were introduced in the role-playing game. By the way, I love the West End game Star Wars RPG. Again, maybe the subject of a different email. Jedi temples, ancient Sith ruins, dark side witches, mystical inscriptions from long ago, magical items. These elements have exploded during the Disney era of Star Wars and with the Filoniverse. In Rebels, there were a lot of old ruins and stone tablets to be explored, not to mention talking Force wolves and whatnot. Some of the most egregious examples are from the sequel trilogy. The map leading Luke Skywalker, for instance, is a plot device that seems to have come from an Indiana Jones movie or a D&D adventure. Why Luke would have left behind a map if he didn't want to be found is another story entirely. Or even worse, the ancient Sith dagger that, once decrypted, leads to the right spot on the crashed Death Star? Again, the plot device of an ancient map is in the Indiana Jones tradition, but in this case it points to something that happened 30 years ago? And the wreckage is shifting in the water all the time, too. Who in their right mind found the crashed Death Star, found the Emperor's throne room, and then inscribed directions to this place in a dagger? The crashed Death Star is not Atlantis. Oh, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Consider the stark contrast with the original trilogy. The location and construction designs of the first Death Star were not found in ancient hieroglyphs or hidden in mystical star maps that light up the room with an eerie glow, but were electronic computer files carried around by an astromech droid. I could go on, but I think you get my point. I'm a bit torn about these elements that have creeped into the Star Wars universe. On one hand, they are cool, I guess, and it provides screenwriters and the audience with something more tangible and gadgety than the teachings of Yoda. But at the same time, it moves away from the original unique feel of the Star Wars galaxy, at least as I remember it, into something more akin to Harry Potter or a quest-based fantasy computer game. Do you agree? And if so, when do you think it started and why? I would love to hear your thoughts. Yours sincerely, Thomas Alvin, September 10th, Brussels. Well, see, this is why I love doing this show, because Thomas, that's a banger of a letter, and I totally agree with you, and I think, you know, it's a weird thing because, like you said, here's what I find so strange. Like Star Wars, obviously, if I were to mention Joseph Campbell and the hero with 1,000 faces, you're all going to take a flying leap out the window. So I won't mention that. But the idea of the Force was very much, you know, it came from martial arts traditions and samurai movies and all that. And it was really all about, I mean, the Force is an energy field, yes. But what they've done is now there's an afterlife. And I'll tell you where the problem really happened. The seeds were set in the original trilogy with Ben Kenobi becoming a Force ghost in Star Wars, in the first Star Wars. And once Ben is talking to Luke from behind or beyond the grave, you've set up all of that. Now, I much prefer a Star Wars. This is why I love Andor so much. Andor is the Star Wars that I wanted to see. If I were to say to somebody who'd never seen Star Wars, who knew nothing about Star Wars, I would show them Star Wars Empire, and I would show them Jedi, I guess. I'd show them Star Wars Empire and Jedi. Then I would have them, I would explain why the end of Rogue One doesn't quite work with the beginning of Star Wars, but then I would direct them to go watch Andor and Rogue One. That's it. That's all I would say. Because, you know, the Filoni-verse and all this stuff, I mean, I get it. I get what Dave Filoni's doing, but, you know, watching hyperspace capable whales and all of this Ahsoka business, and I'm watching all this stuff, and I liked all that stuff, but to me that's not Star. It's like you said, the Filoni-verse. It really has nothing to do with Star Wars. Star Wars is a story about all of us. Star Wars, Han Solo's a truck driver, Luke's a farmer, Ben Kenobi's a veteran of foreign wars. You know, they have to go help a woman in distress. And then you can equate it to any struggle between a stronger military force or government and young, scrappy upstarts. All of this other stuff, it's no longer like allegorical or anything. It's total fantasy land. And for me, I'm like, it's fine. But to me, Star Wars, like Star Trek, like when I look at Luke Skywalker, the twin sons of Tatooine setting as he's turning the power, as Uncle Owen's turning the power off, and you hear those strains of the score with the French horns. Everyone knows. Everyone's been Luke. We're all Luke. I'm not fucking Ahsoka. I don't relate to her at all, you know, and everyone else, it's like, who are these people? I get it. It's now an amalgamation of every space opera that ever was, and it's fine, you know, but I'm out. I mean, to me, to be honest, I love Star Wars. I mean, you know, I'm building a studio scale Millennium Falcon model that's going to take me 2 years to get all the parts, but I've always wanted to spend real time. It's going to be all lit up. It's going to be amazing. I love Star Wars. I have a 1/72 fine molds model of Falcon I built right over there. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm surrounded by all kinds of Star Wars stuff. But to me, Star Wars really is Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and the rescue of Han Solo and the confrontation in the Emperor's throne room in Jedi. That's it. Everything else is just a bunch of gobbledygook. It's fine. I'm glad people love it, and I respect that. But it's like you said, it's lost all of its meaning. It's only about itself anymore. And it's even gotten to the point where Grand Admiral Thrawn was introduced in Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy. You know, when it came out, I read it. I mean, Star Wars had been dormant. Dark Empire came out from Dark Horse Comics, and Heir to the Empire came out from was it Bantam or Ballantine? Who put that out? And I read it. It was cool. I was like, that's cool. Cool continuation. Dark Empire I thought was cooler, but they're both cool. Now I don't even get the Thrawn from those books. Now I'm getting the Thrawn that's been co-opted from the animation department, and now it's going to be turned into an animated. I mean, the whole Ahsoka and all, the conception of animated characters is different than characters from live action. And now I'm watching characters that, one, you had a character from a book that's been turned into an animated character that's now going to be a live action character that isn't quite the character that was created by Timothy Zahn. So that's how I kind of feel all of Star Wars is. It's been taken over by other people that are repurposing it and moving it away from what its core ideas were. And I think, to me, what the Force is somebody understanding. It's like martial arts training. That's what it is. It's understanding that the life force that surrounds us and binds us, it's not passed along through blood. We're all a part of the Force. We're all a part of the living force. And if you can't, everybody can tap into it. You don't have to have a fucking bloodline to do so. When they started doing that, I'm like, I tapped out. But it was really, I think, what led to it is the idea that there's a Force afterlife. What does that mean? Like, if there's a Force afterlife, we saw in Return of the Jedi, at the end of Return of the Jedi, it started with Ben Kenobi, and maybe I could buy it. But at the end of Return of the Jedi, and we have two versions of it. You have Sebastian Shaw playing old Anakin Skywalker that we saw revealed in Return of the Jedi. But because of the prequels, even George Lucas fundamentally has altered because now, apparently, if you die, when you die as an old man, you're no longer Sebastian Stan in the Force. You get to look like young, hot Hayden Christensen, which throws that. If you go from Return of the Jedi to the special edition of Return of the Jedi in 97, so if you go from 83, there was one vision of the Force, and then George Lucas even changed that by saying, "Oh, this Force ghost is now his younger self when he was not corrupted by the dark side." So how does that work, George? You've now presented me with two versions of Force Ghost Anakin Skywalker. Most people were like, wait, what? Well, right, because if you go back and you watch the original version of Return of the Jedi, Sebastian Shaw played. I have a 12-inch action figure of Sebastian Shaw. He was Anakin. Old Anakin is this kindly old man that's smiling along with Yoda and Ben Kenobi. And then if you watch the special edition in 97, George got rid of him and put Hayden Christensen at the end. So what does that say about being a Force ghost? And here's the problem. If you're a Force ghost, like, do you sleep? Like, where do you live? Do you just wander around through the living Force? Like, you see a bunch of geometric shapes and what looks like, a navigation map? Like, what do you do? See, here's my problem with all this gobbledygook that they come up with. So you're watching this, like, Anakin's hanging out and in this episode of Ahsoka, which I kind of liked. We're gonna go back through the Clone Wars. We're gonna go do all these things. Where are people hanging out for the rest of the day? When Anakin is not teaching Ahsoka a lesson that, by the way, she already learned on the animated shows, what's he doing? Does he go to see a movie? Does he go hang out in cafes and drink Force wine? What are they doing? Like, when you see these kinds of things, when you think about the afterlife and you think, what are they doing in their off time when you're not seeing them on the show? If you're in the world between worlds, like, what are you doing? Are you going banging hot chicks on, because that's what I would be doing. I'd be running around through all of time and space, finding, like, the hottest Twi'leks. I'd be like, who can I go to? I wonder what she tastes like. I mean, I know I'm being facetious, or am I? But that's the thing. It's like, what do you... And so when you're showing me these things, suddenly I have a million questions. Like, what are you doing when you're not in this episode of Ahsoka, Anakin? What are you doing with the rest of the time? Then there's the other Mortis gods or whatever the fuck they are. I mean, I don't even remember. It's like, what does any of this have to do with Star Wars? Because Star Wars is about its audience. It's about us. We're Luke. Would we have followed? Would we have gone to Ben Kenobi after Owen and Beru were killed? Would we have gone, I want to go to Alderaan and learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father? Is that us? Because Star Wars, this is the big problem with Star Wars. Luke Skywalker and Han Solo are us. So is Ben Kenobi. They're us. They're all of our dreams and our hopes, and we want to go rescue princesses or be princesses and be. I mean, let's face it. Leia was a girl boss, and I fucking loved her. I never thought to myself, "Oh, she's a girl." I'm like, she was awesome. I mean, when they're getting out of the cell block, and she has the stormtrooper pistol and blows open a hole. This is some rescue. I mean, that was awesome. I didn't sit there and go, "She's a girl." I'm like, Princess Leia kicks ass. If you look at Star Wars, she lies to Vader to his face. She lies to Tarkin to his face. Come on. She's got the biggest balls of all. And like, people are like, yeah, you just don't like female characters. We all love female characters. Just make them kick ass. But, and she was kick ass. She was kick ass when I was 10. I'm like, where's my Leia action figure? And you know what? I played with her a lot. Not in any weird, creepy way. I had her kick ass. I put her in the cockpit of an X-Wing fighter. Why shouldn't she be? I never understood. She should have been I understood she had to, lead the attack. She was Senator Organa. I get it. But she should have been in an X-Wing. She could have. Where was I? Yeah, so Star Wars. I'm with you 100%. It's gone in this other direction. And, unfortunately, you know where it's gone? It's gone in the direction of Lord of the Rings. It's because they're kind of the same in a way, hero's journey, all that. And it's unfortunately, Tolkien looms large, fantasy looms large, but it all comes back. I mean, you could say that it goes back to Norse mythology, but in the 20th century, you want to throw around those things. I get it. Wagner, Ring into Nibelung, I get all that stuff, but you know what? Star Wars went from veering off into more science fiction to going off into fantasy. And it went off into fantasy. It started with Star Wars, but it was cemented forever by the end of Return of the Jedi. When Luke saw the Force ghosts of all three of them, then suddenly it's like there's a VFW, a Veteran of Foreign Wars office in the Force Afterlife somewhere. And the problem is, when you think about the Force Afterlife, then you start thinking, well, then what? What does that mean? Can you go anywhere? So that's where I think and people have ran with it. I wish they would have gone the other way. But a great letter, Thomas, nonetheless, a great letter. So thank you for writing that in. I very much appreciate it. It was good. This one comes from let's see, who does this one come from? Let's see. Justin Horton. Oh, here we go. Hello, Mr. Burnett. You may not remember me. We chatted briefly once on Twitter a few years ago. I chat with a lot of people on Twitter, so please forgive me. I've been a follower of your programs and YouTube for the last few years and a member of both your Discord and Facebook group. Thank you. I'm contacting you because I've been working on a pitch for a new Star Trek series, but unfortunately don't know what to send it or where to send it or how to submit it. Since you are a fellow Star Trek enthusiast, I thought I might send it to you, see what you think of it. Do you think it might be accepted by the people in charge of Paramount? Justin, I hate to be the destroyer of dreams. I recently read somebody else submitted their Star Trek series proposal. Now, people would say, Rob, why can you accept a Star Trek series proposal to read and not my screenplay? Because I have nothing to do with Star Trek, and I'm the Star Trek is owned by Paramount. There's nothing I can do about it, and so I can do that. I can read your Star Trek series proposal, and one was good. Unfortunately, Paramount doesn't look at anything like that. See, the thing is, when it comes to things like IP, now the studios look for either people or people with production companies, or hopefully a combination of both, to take over based on their past experience, and whatever corporate decision making they're going through. And they're going to only deal with people that have a long, long track record. I mean, say what you want about J.J. Abrams. Bad Robot has a terrific track record in terms of making television. So, you know, everything from Alias to Person of Interest to Lost. I mean, you look at all the stuff that they've done. And then even Alex Kurtzman goes back to doing stuff like Xena Warrior Princess, which people would be like, well, that's kind of like Star Trek. But that's why he gets the job. And he did also co-write Into Darkness and Star Trek 09, which I would be the first person to go, but he wrote Star Trek 09 and Into Darkness. But anyway, so no one from the outside, unfortunately. The odds of that are infinitesimally small. And what I would suggest is, and I would say this to anybody, believe me, I know, take whatever you've written as a Star Trek proposal and turn it into your own original IP and do something with it. Crowdfund a documentary, you know, or not a documentary, crowdfund one of our, Mr. Foley, one of our imagination connoisseurs, has an incredible comic project called The Orchard that he's doing. It's incredible. The artwork's great. It's amazing. They just started crowdfunding that. So go do something with it and make it your own. You're never going to be able, as much of a Star Trek fan as you are, you're never going to be able to come up with a serious proposal. I'll give you an example. There's like David Mack and a few of my favorite Star Trek writers wrote a whole series, the Star Trek Vanguard series, that took place on a space station concurrently with the time of TOS. I think it's like 10 books. It's great. It's great. That could have been a Star Trek show. Peter David, the great Peter David, comic book writer, novelist, written Star Trek books, great Star Trek books. He wrote a series called Star Trek New Frontier, whole new cast of characters. Would have been monumentally better if they had adapted that book series into a new a new Star Trek show, Star Trek New Frontier. Set of Next Generation New Frontiers, and the captain in that book series is named Mackenzie Calhoun. Sold. Captain Calhoun. Come on, bring it on. They don't even fucking know about that book series, and there's a lot of them. It started out as a paperback series, then it moved over into hardcover. And here's the thing, the people that run Star Trek have no fucking clue. No clue. I mean, they're aware that books are out there, but they haven't read them. And the thing is frustrating is every single one of the New Frontier books is way better than anything they've given us in Discovery or Strange New Worlds. Way better. And it's already there. It's already there. I mean, it's so frustrating. Same is true of Star Wars, by the way. The best of the Star Wars novels, they're not all good. I would say, like, usually my account in this kind of fiction is 20% is really, really good. 10% is really, really good. 20% of it's good. The rest, you know. But unfortunately, that's my answer. Which I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that. But what can you do? But I want to thank you for writing in. And I would suggest you've already done the work, so turn it into an original IP. Because why not? Who knows what will happen? Could be something cool. Here's one from Jessica. See, you know what? If you hear the name Jessica, you know what you're thinking. You know what you're thinking. I know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking about Logan's Run. But anyway, this is not about Logan's Run, but it is from Jessica. Jessica says, "Hi, Mike and Rob. My name's Jessica. I was just watching Robservations and his comments about Strange New Worlds Season 2. As a novelist and fan of traditional 90s era Star Trek, I agree with what Rob's saying about the quality of writing in this new era of Star Trek. My question for Rob is, has he watched The Orville? Yes. I know that lots of Star Trek fans, myself included, feel that The Orville is more Star Trek than the current Star Trek offerings, perhaps because Seth MacFarlane understands the nuances of what makes high-quality space opera, plus the fact that he's hired multiple Star Trek veteran writers like Andre Bormanis and Brandon Braga, etc., to work on the show, as well as Star Trek alum to star, Marina Sirtis, Tim Russ, etc. I just wanted to offer the option of watching The Orville to Rob as a beacon of hope. As one YouTuber's shirt said, Seth Trek, a renewed hope. Anyway, appreciate your time. Regards, Jessica. A lot of people tell me this, Jessica, and I have to tell you, I really like The Orville. I think it's great. That said, I think that The Orville, my problem with The Orville is it's such a riff on Next Generation, and indeed that they've done some really good stuff, but it's such a riff on Next Generation that I see it as sort of it's like a pocket universe, cul-de-sac of the Next Generation universe, and it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it, and I do like the characters, but to me, it's too evocative. And by the way, all 3 seasons of The Orville I really liked, but the Kalon they do a lot more interesting things with the Kalon than they did with the Borg, and by the end of the 3rd season, we're all coming to your wedding. What do you mean all of you? I mean all of us. The entire Kalon civilization. I really liked The Orville, so it's definitely good stuff, but I don't see it as my jam is For All Mankind. That's what I'm digging. For All Mankind. So, yeah. Martin Molina sends in a super chat and said, "Evening, Rob. You've been an inspiration and thanks for everything you do. My girlfriend likes to have double feature movie nights." Ooh. Oh, my God. Okay, wait a minute. Martin Molina, you've got a keeper. Check this out. My girlfriend likes to have double feature movie nights, and recently we watched Baskin and Past Lives. I can't even wrap my head around that. Your girlfriend, my God, why is she your girlfriend? Make her your wife. Wife her up. Baskin? Okay, for those of you who don't know it's not Baskin Robbins. It's not a movie about ice cream. I saw Baskin at the behest of the late, great John Schnapp. He came in one day to Collider Heroes. He says to me, he goes, "Dude, I watched a Turkish horror film last night on Netflix, and you have to watch it. It's called Baskin." I go, "Baskin?" And apparently Baskin is Turkish for like police raid or something, if memory serves. And he goes, I go, "What's it about?" He goes, "I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you what it's about." I go, "Come on, you got to." He goes, "Well, it's about these dickhead cops that are called to go on a drug bust." And I'm like, "That's what you want me to watch?" He goes, "That's all you need to know." And I sat there slack-jawed watching Baskin. Now, I don't know. It's got a lot of Clive Barker in it. If you don't know anything about Baskin and you like horror movies, go in and watch it. I mean, I really loved it. It's not perfect, and the ending is a little unsatisfying, but I really, really liked it because it was Turkish, and the fact I'm like, Turkey's like predominantly a Muslim country. Can they make movies like this in Turkey? And I just read that there's a new Turkish horror film coming out, but to pair Baskin with Past Lives, oh my God, I love that. Talk about Barbenheimer. That's a good one. And then you did Bottoms and They Live. You don't have to tell me that They Live's from 1988. Again, a lesbian fight club, and Roddy Piper sees aliens with the help of sunglasses. I love your girlfriend. First of all, I saw Past Lives just the other day, which I loved. What a wonderful, wonderful movie. I will definitely be buying it when it comes out. And I loved Baskin. And Bottoms is, just so you know, I saw Bottoms. I wasn't supposed to see it. I watched a screener. I got a code. People were a little upset. I was not supposed to say, because I got it from somebody. They shouldn't have shared it with me, but that's how I saw Bottoms. But I love Bottoms. I thought Bottoms was hysterical, and I like Joyride. To me, Bottoms and Joyride would have been a great double feature, but I thought Bottoms was hysterical. But Bottoms and They Live, lesbian fight club in high school, and then Roddy Piper fighting aliens, John Carpenter. I love it. That's fantastic. Your girlfriend. My thoughts on those films are all great films. You know what? You should send in Martin Molina's girlfriend's picks of the week. Martin Molina's girlfriend. We don't even need to know her name. Because she might want to stay anonymous. Or you can be at Martin Molina's girlfriend, blah blah blah's double feature of the week. Because that would be a good thing. That would be a fun thing to do. Joey Johnson says, is it true that your dog is from Lancaster and that you're adopted? I recall you talking about that before, and if so, we have those things in common. I thought that was cool. Yes, I am adopted. I knew I was adopted from. I always knew I was adopted. And that's a much longer story. I could do a whole. I've done some streams about being adopted, and you can watch. I didn't know it. I had a 100% biological sister I met in 1996 in Hawaii, and there are 2 videos of our very first meeting that are on this channel. Like brother and sister reunited after 21 or 29 years. You can find it here on the Burnettwork somewhere. I don't know if my dog is from Lancaster. I don't know if we got them. I have 3 dogs. And right now there are 11 dogs in our house because our dog who had puppies in March had a second litter of puppies. The first, we had people wanting more puppies. And also it was a fairly lucrative thing for us because our puppies were not cheap. But everybody who got the puppies were very happy with them. So we had more today. We have 7 more puppies. We have 4 boys and 3 girls. Now the first batch of puppies, we put color-coded collars on them when they were born, and we referred to them by their color. This time, even though they're color-coded, I gave them all pop culture names based on the color of their collars. So here are the 7 puppies. Snow White, Prince, Pinky Tuscadero, Gandalf, Trixie, Mr. Spock, and Captain Kirk. Those are our 7 puppies. Spock's a boy. He got a blue. Elizabeth, God bless her. This is why she's the girl for me. She calls me up and she goes, I was not home. I was at the grocery store getting dog food. And she calls me up and she goes, the 7th puppy was finally born. I gave the 7th puppy a gold collar. And guess what I named him? Kirk. I'm like, that's my girl. There you go. So, there you are. Mark Camphausen says, recently watched Rod Serling's Patterns and Requiem for a Heavyweight. Both are great. Any Rod Serling recommendations outside of Twilight Zone? Well, I mean, obviously there's Night Gallery, the other show he hosted. And to be honest, I don't remember. Did Rod Serling write any Night Gallery? He must have. And then, Planet of the Apes, he did a draft of that. But I can't think of any off the top of my head. I know that there's one I'm missing. But Night Gallery. If you haven't seen Night Gallery, he hosts it. And it's a horror Twilight Zone. Darth Plato, our friend Darth Plato asks, the official historian of the Burnettwork asks, what do you think is the best Vietnam War movie? Ooh, that's tough. The best, maybe I should say John Woo's Bullet in the Head, but that wouldn't suffice. That wouldn't answer your question. The best Vietnam War movie. Well, you know what? I would probably go with. I have to go with Apocalypse Now, not just because it's one of my favorite movies, but because it's set during the Vietnam War, and Coppola said in many interviews that it was Vietnam. It was crazy like Vietnam. But I think it has a much. I mean, obviously it's a literary adaptation, but I think about all the Vietnam War movies that I've seen, and in terms of encapsulating all of that kind of craziness, there's so many different kinds. Like, I thought Brian De Palma's Casualties of War was a great Vietnam movie, but that was an anti-war movie. It wasn't specifically about Vietnam. And The Deer Hunter, more like an American myth. I mean, there's other Vietnam movies like Coming Home or Born on the 4th of July that is about what happens afterwards. But I mean, it's cliche to say, but I probably think that it is Apocalypse Now, only because the insanity of that war and what it meant to people at home and the people that went and the people that experienced it. That's probably my favorite. It's so weird because when you think about Vietnam War movies, it was such a genre of film for me growing up. Like in the 70s, Like my mother, my mother took me to the Deer Hunter not knowing what kind of a movie it was. My mom likes animals. Oh, it's about somebody who hunts deer. Well, not exactly, Mom. It was traumatizing, but I loved it. But it's probably not, it's not that, it doesn't, I'm sure people would rather have me say something else. But Scott Bartholomew says, new Trek writers have discarded the Okuda's Star Trek chronology in favor of ridiculous tripe to cater to today's woke audiences. Well, here's the thing. I mean, I think we have to retire the word woke. Only because I think that it's too broad, and what does it even mean anymore? But I do think that they are trying to. When I watch like with a lot of programs, I feel like I keep going back to, even though he said it, I keep going back to. Now I'm drawing a blank on his name. The Damon Lindelof, talking about how TV writers, when they get together, they liked to out-woke each other. And I always thought that was kind of stupid, because I get what they mean. I mean, let's be clear. The idea of representing people that haven't had a voice, and allowing people that are from marginalized groups, minority groups, and bringing them up is a great thing. It's a great thing. But you can't do it. You can't do it at the expense of storytelling, and you can't do it at the expense of other people. You can't trade one oppression for another, which is what's going on right now. And that's what people are responding to. You can't do that. It's not helpful for anyone, and you're not serving the story that you're trying to tell. And I think that, when Star Trek, I pointed out that Star Trek did things stealthily, like when it would have black actors playing guest stars, like when William Marshall played Dr. Richard Daystrom in The Ultimate Computer. I'm sure nobody asked when they had William Marshall. I mean, yeah, okay, he went a little bonkers in that episode, but he was the man who created the duotronic circuit, which was the basis of all starships. He was a black man on TV in 1968, and they're saying he's the smartest man in the Federation. Now, people don't talk about that when they talk about race relations, but they did that in Star Trek, and like Percy Rodriguez in Court Martial. Percy Rodriguez, beautiful, handsome. I mean, if I could look like a black dude, one of the many, I would want to look like Percy Rodriguez and have his voice. He was one handsome dude. And I guess he was Canadian. But he was the head of a starbase who was prosecuting Kirk. Now, they don't talk about that much, about these kinds of things on Star Trek, but they were doing that stuff that was so on purpose. And the networks probably were like, wait a minute, you didn't tell us you cast a black actor to play the smartest man in the Federation? Oh, we didn't? Good on them. But nowadays, they'll be happy to tell you, look at how progressive we are. And the thing is, if you have to tell people this, you've already lost, because it means you're not really progressive. If you're really progressive, then tell a story that's a really progressive story. Tell me a great science fiction story that deals with these whatever's going on in our culture today. Give me the science fiction version of it, and tell me a really hard-hitting story. I mean, people are mad because the 4th season episode, The Outcast, I think it's 4th season, Next Generation, didn't cast a male actor when they did it. And they're not wrong, but at the time, you got to take baby steps. You can't just jump into the pool, into the deep end. But it was a provocative episode. Let's see a follow-up to that. You want to address these issues, do so in a fascinating science fiction way, because that's what Star Trek is. Now now all anybody cares about is like the same emotional relationships that people have. Is Spock and Christine Chapel are they gonna bang? That's what Star Trek's become. And I mean, this last animated episode where Star Trek is shown as, or Spock is shown as a complete idiot. Like, what the fuck are they writing? I have no idea. It's not good. Hunter Becknell says, hi, Rob. Late to the party. Ahsoka episode 5 was amazing. It just proves that Hayden is a good actor given a proper script. Now I want to see more live-action Clone Wars. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. They might as well go back and remake the Clone Wars in live action. People would watch it. It's Star Wars to me. Give me more Andor. Give me more stories where I relate to what's going on. It has something analogous to what's going on in the real world. I know that seems crazy to say, but Star Wars and Empire, and to a certain extent, some of Jedi kind of did. I watch Ahsoka, and it's so spun off into, as our letter writer said, craziness, fantasy, which is strange. Smickball, with a $20 super chat. Thank you, Smickball. I just drove 5 hours to Glamp in an RV in Fredericksburg, Texas. I couldn't sleep, but I saw you were on, but 2 hours in. I'll rewatch later. R&B, you're the best. I was a PA for 6 years about 20 years ago. Many of your stories are so familiar. Well, Smickball, that's very nice of you. Enjoy glamping in Frederick. See, now I want to know why Fredericksburg, Texas. Glamping there. Is there a reason you went to Fredericksburg? Now I want to know. What's going on in Fredericksburg? I must find out. Martin Molina, by the way, who came up with this great double bill idea, did send in a $50 super chat, and I want to thank you for that. But I just realized that, and that's not why I think we should have Martin Molina's girlfriend double features. That's the kind of thing where if somebody would make it, just has to be a graphic. Martin Molina's girlfriend's double feature this week is, by the way, everybody, I mean, if you're going to watch Baskin and Past Lives, that's a good way to start. Now, I have questions, Martin, too, about did you watch them back to back? Because you did say they were double features. Or do you watch them over consecutive nights? Because watching them together, watching them one right after another is the best. I mean, one of my favorite horror double features is watching Martyrs, and then when you want to scoop your eyeballs out with a teaspoon, watch another great French horror film, Inside, which is a whole lot of fun. There you go. So, well, listen, everybody. This has been a very fine episode. I've thoroughly enjoyed this episode. I got a lot more letters to read. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll be doing, we didn't do Midnight Musings last weekend, but we're going to be doing Midnight Musings. And tomorrow at 11 a.m., I'm going to be doing a fully articulated with Six Scale Mafia, Anthony from Six Scale Mafia. Because I got a really cool thing to show that it was much cooler than I thought. I was like, wow, I really want this, but it turned out to be cooler than I thought it was going to be. So on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. I want to thank the great Tom Jr. Jackson, who's taunting me. I mean, I didn't even see I was busy today that RM was having a watch party and was talking about To Live and Die in L.A., and I wasn't there. I felt terrible. I felt bad. So what can I do? But I did. But anyway, Tom Jr. Jackson, thanks for being a great moderator. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel via super chats and tips. And being members. And we'll see about this member chat. I want to have one today. Not today. Be this weekend. And, yeah. So that's very exciting. And there's a couple other exciting announcements hopefully we can make about various projects that are happening not on the YouTube channel, but in conjunction with the YouTube channel that are going to be very, very cool. So look for those. And on that note, I would say to all of you, have a better night.